Hey there, welcome back to the channel. I'm Derek. This is Chocolate City Tech. If this is your first time, welcome as usual. Today we have a lot of ground to cover, so let's just jump right into it. So for this episode, what we'll be doing is we are setting up our authentication, and what we're going to be using for authentication is just identity server. Excuse me, not identity server. Don't want to get that confused. What we're going to be using is ASP.NET identity, all right, which basically comes with some simple ways to log in, log out, and stuff like that, and it works. To keep this very simple, what we're going to be using is JWT tokens. JWT tokens have their issues just like every other sort of authentication system, but it works and it's pretty simple to set up. So that's what we're going to be going with. Now, to make it a little bit more, to make it a little better, as you know, with most security, what you can do is add additional layers on top of that. So for JWT, one of the layers that we can add is refresh tokens. So we probably won't get to refresh tokens in this particular series. Oh, excuse me, how to say it, in this episode, but we're gonna get to it maybe next time around in the second part to this authentication, because it's going to be a lot of coding, a lot of stuff to do. So let's get going. So now we're going to do a lot of coding. So this is going to be a long one. So strap in, get yourself ready. It's going to be a lot of coding. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set up our, get our project going. So we're going to start with creating a brand new project. This is obviously going to be a .NET Core. So it's going to be C# as a, don't have to worry about a platform. Make sure the language is C#, obviously. And it's going to be a .NET Core, a web API. Specifically, it's going to be a web API. So, but just check the ASP.NET Core web application for now. We'll move to the next. Now we need to name our application. Now we already know this is going to be an exotic car rental, so might as well just get that going. All right, so last time we met, we decided on the naming convention was going to be exotic rentals, and we had two folders. One was a server folder and the other was a client folder. So here, just go ahead and put that in the server folder. And do not place it in the same solution because we may create more projects, but I don't think we would because I want to keep this as simple as possible. Click create. Now you get a chance to select a few things. All right, and there it is. So very simple. There's nothing really happening here. First thing I usually do is just run it, make sure everything is good to go. So let's go ahead and do that. Click the IS button here. Actually, don't do that. Go ahead and click the exotic one here because I want to run it on Kestrel. So, all right, there it is. All right, so we can see that obviously it's running. And this is the thing that by checking that Open API, that's what we get. We get a nice little Swagger support, so we don't actually have to set up Swagger like you used to with the previous template, which is kind of nice, right? You can see that everything works here. Well, I hope everything works. Execute, and you can see that came back with a status code of 200, and the response body is some hard-coded stuff in the, I assume that what it forecast template here, class here, and a controller. All right, cool. All right, so everything is working. So let's get started up. First thing we want to do is we want to install some dependencies to get our stuff going. First dependency we're going to install here is get some sweet login by Serolog. So let's go ahead. Let's go to the browser and grab Serolog. All right, so here are the things we want to install. Scroll down for Visual Studio Serolog package for the console sync so that it can give us some nice logs to the console. Just select that. Get back in here and package manager console, bring that up. We only have one project, but normally what you want to make sure is always make sure that you select the appropriate project. In our scenario, it's only one, so not much else to say that. All right, that's it. That was nice and fast. Let's grab the other one. console. As I mentioned, we're not going to install the one for the file. This allows you to log to the files. All right, so that's set up. So now, as far as this part is concerned, we don't actually have to change anything. It's just automatically going to switch this. Well, shouldn't say automatically. We're going to have to set it up. So let's go ahead and do that. So now in our startup, but in our program CS, we're going to switch this over to actually let it know to use serial log for our console log. And I got some coding I'm going to just use instead of watching me type every single one of these pieces. So the system.io, ASP.NET Core, dependency, of course, serial log itself, system.dependency, and ignore this is here. You haven't seen this yet. These are things we're going to be adding in a few minutes. So for now, I'm just going to comment this portion here. We'll come back to it later. All right. It appears to be all here. So let's run it real quick, make sure it's good to go. And of course, it's the web API. Let's put that to the side. And now look at that. Now isn't that sweet? So serial log is working. Launches tells us what we're going to be doing. And in fact, let's execute. You can keep an eye on it here. Maybe that's doing too much. And let's make a request real quick. Try it out. Execute. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Yes, it is. All right, so we got that part set up. So now let's get to the fun part, authentication. Let's bring in the rest of our dependencies. And we're going to need, this is always the fun part, the names. All right, so we're going to be doing obviously identity. We're going to be using ASP.NET Core identity, and we're also going to be using Entity Framework as the backend store. So make our life easy. We just go ahead and grab these. And I got the name of it. So we're going to need Microsoft.ASP.NET Core identity.identity framework core. Try that again. All right, so go ahead, install that piece. You see the stable is 5.01. So that's the one you want. Go ahead and install that. And you see that comes with as a dependency identity framework core, which is what we need. So install that piece. Click install. Yes, we accept that. All right, so here it is. We have our dependencies installed for identity. So the next thing we want to do is we also want to get the piece that we need for our connecting to the database. So we're going to be using Postgres. So for Postgres, we need a provider, just like anything else. Now, we're using Postgres. That's what we sort of decided on. If for whatever reason you're not able to install Postgres, it's fine because we're using we're using Entity Framework Core, which doesn't really care too much in terms of like what's in the back end, because it's going to translate the SQL to whatever it needs to translate it to. So you can use MySQL. You just have to make sure you're going to use a different provider than what I use. It's this one right here. So install that. And we are good to go. We officially have everything we need for this portion. All right. Let's build that real quick, make sure nothing is complaining. Build success. Sweet. All right, what's next? Next thing you want to do is you want to add the settings that we need. So we're obviously developing locally, so we want to make our changes here in this app settings.development. When we go to deploy, we can add another version of this. And with that, all you have to do is just then change the launch settings to point to a different JSON and stuff like that, or JSON. Anyway, so back to where we were at. So what we need is we need a connection string. And for the Postgres, now, if you recall when we created our Docker instance, so what we created last time was we had our Docker. Right now it's running. If yours isn't running, just hit the run. So that created for us two services, a Postgres database that's running. And as you can see, it's running on port 5555, right? And here are the passwords that we need. And again, it's on localhost 5555. And along with that, we also created a pgadmin, which is running on port 776, I think it was 777. Okay. And again, here are the passwords and stuff like that that we need. So let's go ahead and grab and create the connection string for it. All right, so the connection string here is server. And if you're wondering where I got this from, right, so this is, if you need any information, this is the Postgres provider that we're using. Any framework core, come to this section and it gives you the details as to like what you need to get going. Um, you know, builder use MPSG and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to be doing. All right, so bring that down. So server name is localhost, right? Because our Docker instance is running on localhost. The port that we gave it is 5555. Keep in mind when we create our Docker, right? We said for this particular Postgres DB that it was going to run on 5432 in a Docker container, but we're going to map it to our local port, which is 5555, right? That's it. How many times is that? 5555. Okay. All right. Let's name our, and I believe we also created a database for it already. So let me go and check that database because I already forgot about the database we created. Bring a Docker up and we're going to launch this. And what's that username again? The username is, what is it? I got it here. It's that local dev at Gmail and password, which was very secretive. That's right. Nice. All right, so you remember that we created all this last time we were here. If you did not, obviously just go back and watch one of the previous videos. Took a little bit of time to connect. I believe the one that we created was Cocoa Exotics. Yeah, that's the one. Cocoa Exotics. Nice. So let's rename this for the database to be Cocoa Exotics. Cocoa.exotics. Username is the same, password is the same, everything else is the same. All right, so got that piece going, so that's working. Oh, we think that's working. So what's the next thing we want to do? We want to create some settings for the Jwt tokens that we're going to be using. So let's just go ahead and create that. And let's give it a name of Jwt options. And for Jwt tokens, what we're going to need is we're going to need a key. So we can just call the key and the key will come back and fill that in. We're going to need an issuer. So essentially who issued this Jwt, audience, who is it intended for. We'll come back and fill that in a minute. And we also going to want it to be, expire at some point in time. So this would be a minutes. So for expiration time, let's just go with 30 minutes or something like that. For the audience is going to be us. So we can just do HTTPS. For now, we can just do chocolate. City tech.com. And yeah, just copy that same one, put it as the issuer. And for the key, you just need something that's long enough. Doesn't really matter what it is. And that's probably more than long enough. All right, so we got that going. We got JWT options. We have our connection string as exotic rentals. And let me actually call it exotic rental DB context. More conventional with the DB context attached to it. You don't have to do that, but I just do it. All right, so now that we have this, let's create a folder where we're going to keep some of these objects so we can actually. So what I like to do is I like to create a config folder of some kind. So let's create a new folder, configuration, so maybe even easier. Let's call it settings. And in the settings here, let's create a class. Call that JWT options. Actually, first, let's create a, JWT options. And fill it with what we need. So we need a key. So the key is going to be a string. We need another string of the audience. We also need issuer. And we need, what else do we say we need here? We need the expiring date. All right, so let's make that an integer. And we call that expiry. Oops, let me take that out. Sweet. For the authentication, when we go to seed our database, and also when we create things like roles and stuff like that, we want to have some options for that as well. So let me create another one for authentication options. I just call it auth options or auth settings. Auth settings. And what we need, it's not really going to be a class, it's actually going to be enums. So let's call this application roles. For our application, we want to have a admin. We're going to have staff, I believe we said. Right? Actually, said we also going to have a manager, I believe, in our database talk. And of course, we want to have our customer as well. What else? We probably need claims too. I'll leave claims out for now. And I'll explain a bit about what all these is going to do for us in a few minutes. So we have our settings, off settings, JWT options, and so on and so forth. Sweet. All right, what's next? Let's create another folder. This is where we're going to keep our entities. Convention is well, let me kill that. Some conventions are to create a models folder and put all that stuff in there. Some people create entities folder and put that in there. Doesn't really matter. In this scenario, I'm just going to create a models folder. So add models. These are going to represent our entities. So I guess that's why let me rename that. That's why might as well just call it entities, right? Exactly. So our very first entity is one that we already know. It's very easy, right? We need our user. So create a class. I'm gonna call this application user, which a lot of times is a convention. App user, application user, something like that. So our application user is the user that's going to represent our user class in the database, right? Now, normally when you create a user like this, all you need to do is add it to the DB context, and any framework handles creating the object for you in the database. But this user is a special kind of user. This user is tied in directly with identity, ASP.NET Core identity for authentication. So when we create an application user like this, it's not just a regular user. It's a user that specifically inherits from identity. Yes, and actually make sure that it inherits from identity user and bring in that. And here what we can do now is we can update the identity user. Now the reason we're doing this instead of going with the base identity user, and again, you don't have to actually create this separate user. Any framework goes and creates it for you. The reason we did this is because when you go look at identity user, this is one of the craziest user, craziest entities. It has all these properties, right? All these fields. So logout, two-factor enable, phone number, email confirm, so on and so forth. But what it doesn't have is first name and last name. So that's why we created so that we can actually add first name and last name to it. So let's go ahead and, because if you remember from our database talk, the user was going to have a first name. Yeah. Copy that here and just change this to last name. And whatever else, whatever fields you want to add, if you want to add additional properties to this identity user, you can just go ahead and add that to this user here. For now, this is more than good enough for our usage, so it should be good enough, right? I'm also actually going to create a models folder, and I'm going to use this mostly for view models. I don't think I'm going to use any sort of mapping, like auto mapper, because I want to keep things as simple as possible. All right, so what else do we need to get our authentication piece going? So we need to create a another class, create a seeds folder that's going to use to seed our application when the app begins and starts up. If you recall, when we first set this section up, I mentioned that this part here I needed to put what do you call it? I need to comment it out because it wasn't there yet. It didn't exist yet. So that's what we're about to do now is go ahead and create that. So I need to create a seed folder or seed data folder. So add folder called seed data. And inside of that, add a class seed data. What's the purpose of this class? So the purpose of this class is seed data. Now, one of the ways that you can do this is you can create actually like a standalone application, maybe something like a console app, so you can run it anywhere. All you have to do is essentially connect to your application, and then you can just see data. For our purpose, we need to see some data to test with. So that's what we're gonna do. Specifically, we need to seed roles and claims. Again, I don't think I'll do claims for now, but we need to at least seed claims and also see a user so that we can, have something to play with. It's going to be a static class. Actually, let me just go ahead and change this because this is already public static. Async. It's going to be async. And let's go to what? Seed async. And what does it need? It needs a user class, or specifically it needs a identity service user manager. And also we're not checking passwords, so we don't need password manager, but we do need the user manager and also the role manager. So let's bring those two in. User manager. And here what we do is we also tell, and just bring an ASP.NET Core identity. We're going to tell it what kind of user we're using, and we are using our application user. So we call it right from entities. And the convention here is just user manager. And we also need a role manager. Role manager. Again, identity role. Identity role. There it is. And that works. Bring that down. Sweet. So what we want to do is we want to seed. Yeah, make this a little bigger. We want to seed data. All right, so first kind of data we want to seed is the rows data. So we want to check to see if the row is empty, because this is going to run first my application fires up or whenever it's restarted, right? So if there are no rows at all, then go ahead and run. So let's await row manager dot create row async. And the first kind of row we want to create is first of all, we create an identity row. And here, all you want to do is give it the name of the row that you want to create. Now, if you remember, what we did was in the settings, we created a off settings, right? So these enums, so application row. So let's come back here. So application row dot, bring that in, dot admin, and put that to string so that it obviously stringifies it. Make a copy of that. Oops, go to make a copy. Let's go to the end, put that on there. And what else do we have? We have admin. We also have a manager. Let's copy. All right, stop doing that. We have a staff. And last but not least, our favorite, what we need, a customer, right? 'Cause we're not making money if you have no customers. So let's bring our customer in. All right, so that just stringifies them, so it doesn't actually return to us zeros and ones and twos and stuff like that. It actually turns them into strings. All right, so if there are no rows, then go ahead and create all these for us, please. All right. Oh, another way to do this, I suppose, could just be rows and 0 and count this. I guess we can do that. If the row count is 0, then go ahead and do that. That works. Next thing we want to do is create our user. So what we need here, we need a user. So vr test user equals new application user. First name test user, all right. Last name last test. Email, I don't know, let's just do test user at chocolate city tech.com. Actually, let me go ahead and put that there already. Username, most likely we're going to be using our username for the login instead of email. Yeah, just because. Oh, wait, will we? Doesn't matter. What's the username going to be? I don't know. Maybe I don't know. No. Just use the same one, test user, with no space in it. That works fine. And we don't actually put password, because that's not a property that you want to add here. But we are going to put a password when we go to create a user, so don't worry about that part. Some things that we want to already have set up. We want to say that email is confirmed. What that does is this allows us to actually fold in some functionality. So that's not the one, that's the truth. You're not thinking database yet. What we want to do is we can have a scenario where if a user signs up, they're not authenticated to sign in until they get the email, and then they come back and sign in. So in that scenario, you want to sort of have our user already email be confirmed. So So that's confirm, username. What else do we want to have? Phone number, confirmed. Yeah, sure. That's if we do decide to do that, but I don't know if you're going to. That should pretty much be it. The last thing we want to do is just set an ID on the user. Go with that new, not the string on that, do it. Because by default, identities user uses the ID of string. Now you can change that and just, make that a GUID, but that's fine. We just leave it as is. Doesn't really bother us much. And now we can go ahead and save this user, and not just save the user, but also go ahead and add the user. So if I guess I use that users that count, and it's count a property, or is it a method on here? Equals 0, and this 2 equals, it's not JavaScript or Elixir or something. Then go ahead and create a user. So awaits user manager that create async, and the user is going to be test user, and also takes in a password, and of course our password should be something nice. Secret 1 2 3. I don't know. And then we can await role manager dot. Actually, you can just use user manager dot add roles. And as if you see, if he had created claims, then we could also add some claims. So, but for now, this is going to be fine. Let's add claims async, and it takes in a user. Can let this user be a staff. So that's application rows staff to string. Oh, that's a single row. You only one. So blah 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 blah. Now, if you run this, nothing's gonna happen because we are not actually running this yet, right? So what we want to do is we want to go to our startup, our program CS. So what we are doing here is we are going to run our C data in program whenever the application starts up. Now, in our case, since we're running locally, this is going to be like every single time, right? But in reality, that's not going to be it. Your application starts up once, unless you have to do a deployment that requires a downtime. Then, of course, you restart the machine, or something happens, you have to restart. But typically, you don't have to, you're not going to be doing, trying to run this as many times as many times as whatever. And I believe from what I recall for 2.0, I think this was the recommended way of running your C data, was to do it in the program. So that's what we're going to do. Right. So we need to get access to the service provider, which is .NET Core's dependency injection. So we get access to that. And from that, we can get access to a user manager. And let's go ahead and bring that in. Of course, we also want to bring in our entities. Since we're not only creating a user, we also creating roles. We want to go ahead and create that as well. And last but not least, we also bring in, we go ahead and run the, I misspelled that. So C data sync async, and that's going to run this application. Sweet. All right, so we're moving fast. Hopefully I'm not going too fast for you to get some of the concepts here. I think what I'm going to do is, right as soon as I run the application, I'll come back and just do a quick run through before we go ahead and actually implement the authentication part. So we got this piece going. Should be fine. We don't need any of these here in startup because we're not using anything in startup that requires it yet. We can run the application. As I said before, nothing will happen because we haven't set up entity framework to actually do anything yet. So let's go ahead and get that piece going. This should be the fun part. So if you're tired, grab some coffee or tea, beer, whatever it is, and come back and enjoy the rest of this part here. This is the fun part. Let me actually move myself out of the way a little bit just so you can see more of the area. Pipeline. So these are pipelines. If you're not familiar with them, I suggest you take a quick fresher on pipelines in ASP.NET Core. It's very similar to what you have with Express and stuff like that. So Express.js, that is. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to get in our want to add this section that we created, right? So we want to be able to map that so that we can use the these properties, so our Jwt properties. So to do that, all we need to do is call on, and before we do all this, bring this down a little bit, make some room, make some space. We want to go ahead and configure this section. So we say services dot configure, and it's Jwt options. So we call it. And it's going to say, hey, what is that? And we're going to say, it's that. It's going to say, oh, okay. Go ahead and bring it in. What's wrong with this? Services is a variable used like I said. No, it's not yet. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry about it. Service.configure. Just to be and we want to get access to configuration and configuration get section. I believe it's the blah get section subsection with a specified key. Okay, and the key to it is Jwt options. Jwt options, right? So what that's doing is basically saying, hey, I want you to go into one of these. It could be the top level, or it can be this, or it can be whichever one. But I want you to go and find the section called Jwt options, just to make sure I don't misspell anything. Obviously, even if I misspell it, they're all the same, because that's very important. And configure that so that we can use this object here. So we can now do something like, Jwt options and get the property, or actually can't do it that way, get the value of it and use it that way. So that's what that does. So that configures our Jwt options. Don't need to really comment that, but because you can clearly see what that is doing. So maybe not waste the space. Right. So next thing we want to do is we want to configure our identity. So services dot add identity. It doesn't to be not. And here we want to pass it the identity that we're using. Typically, we can just use identity user, but we have our own, and it's called application user. And let's bring in application user. And application user is also identity row, right? Because we're not we didn't overwrite identity row. And that's something that you can do as well too. If for whatever reason you need to add more stuff to rows than what already exists, like a row name. Usually there's never more to add to row, but sometimes you may need something else, right? And let's not add that because we need to tell it that we also want to use identity entity framework for this. So any framework store. And for any framework, we want to pass it the context that we're using. And we haven't created that yet, so that reminds us to not go and create that. And we'll be back to this portion here. So let's create our new folder. Let's call this folder context. And we're gonna, what we would do is we'll name the context the same as this, which is static right to DB context. So go ahead and just create a regular class. All right, so what I did was I just create a regular class. Now, typically, all you need is to inherit from DB context, right? But we're not just using good old DB context, we also using identity uh, entity framework and combining that with ASP.NET identity on the same table. So what we're going to do instead of that is what we need to do is to actually inherit from identity DB context. So that's identity. I believe it's just DB. Is it lowercase d? We'll find out if it, yeah. And tell it what kind of user we have. We are using application user. Again, bring that through. Perfect, perfect. And create a constructor that takes in the options. Was it DB context options? I believe so. DB context options, which takes in this exotic DB context, and we call that options. And let's go ahead and bring in DB context. There it is. And just pass the options in as the options. Sweet. So what this does is this allows you to come in here and make changes. Like, you know, if you want to change the name of the database, like the prefix of the database, you know, all that fun stuff. We won't be doing any of that, at least not now. So now just leave that as an empty constructor. All right. That is that. Let's get back to our startup so that we can actually put the name that we needed on the startup. So that is DB context here. Oh, that's a lot of space there. First of all, let's bring in DB context from context. Get to the end of this. Bring that in. All right, so what we've done, we've configured the options, we've added identity, and we've told the identity that we want to use our application user as the user, and we're not changing identity row, we're just going to keep that. And any framework store is what we're going to be using. Services dot add entity framework. Specifically, we're going to be using this entity framework here. So dot add DB context. Once again, we're using only one DB context, which is this. Why does it keep putting all this crazy amount of space in here? I don't know. Pass on the options so that you can tell it what we're going to use. So for anyone who is not using, so anyone who isn't using Postgres, this is where you can pass in something else. Use blah, blah, blah. All right, so I bring that in. And now all it needs is for us to pass it the connection string, which you already know. So our connection string exists in configuration. That get connection strings. And the name of the connection string is, I believe, same as this, right? DB context is what we give it. Right? Where's my app settings? That's right. All right, so that's what that's pointing to. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I already mentioned this, but I think I did to make sure that you knew that it's running on port 5555. And that's really all that we need to do. One other thing that you can do actually is you can also tell it where the schema is, excuse me, where the migration assembly is. So we can say that the migration is inside the type of, it's in the same assembly. So just type of startup. But if you add a different class, excuse me, a different project, startup dot, give it a full name, not full name, full name. Yeah, okay. Yep, that's that. Let me bring this down a little bit so it's not looking as crazy. So options that. And so you can also see everything. Perfect. So what are we saying here? We are saying use DB context. Kind of DB context is Postgres, this exotic rental. I wonder, is this even redundant? I think this might be redundant. I think this is use MPG. It's probably a syntactic sugar over this, and maybe you can pass it the connection string. Or not. Okay. Never used Postgres before, so Postgres with then the .NET Core. Use Postgres with I use Postgres with Django, but not with this. So anyway, so that's that. So we are almost ready. At this point, we can actually run this, and things will be just fine. But we are going to go ahead and add in the authentication piece. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just create a void method here. That completes that piece. And that's not really ended, but I just wanted to, and the type is going to be a JWT. As you can see, there's cookies, so off, and all that sweet stuff. We are obviously doing JWT, so JWT barra, JWT options. Come on. What are JWT options? So we're going to actually configure all the JWT stuff that we need, right? So the first thing is JWT JWT options, save token. For now, we'll probably leave it as false. I think in the beginning, what we would do is when we start sending out, we're going to just send out a string. Eventually, we're going to convert that to sending out a, not a string, but instead we're going to be sending out HTTP only to cookie. So, oh, did I already get out of the class? Oh, don't want to do that. That's why I was complaining. Okay. So our first option is save cookies. Our second option is to put in the actual JWT parameters that we need. So JWT options dot token validated parameters equals new identity Microsoft dot identity model dot tokens dot token validation parameter. Whew, man. Yeah. Bring that down here and remove this part because this isn't what we need. Also, why is this all the way in the end here? Come on. Come on, VS. Come on, Visual Studio. Pull this down to the side a little bit. So what do we need? We're going to set up all these in a minute, but let's start with the most essential ones. So, and we get this information from our configuration. So we just call configuration. And we're going to access it via configuration, JWT options, and issuer. All right. So the way to do that is sort of like a dictionary. So say JWT options, and it's issuer. Our audience, it's configuration. Once again, JWT options, and that's audience. Key, the issuer sign-in key. It's a new symmetric. Symmetric security. Security key. Okay. And we need a system.text.encoding. So encoding. System.text. UTF-8. Let's get bytes. And what are the bytes out of? Again, that's going to be configuration. JWT options again. Wait, didn't I copy this? Oh, that wasn't what I copied. Okay. JWT options. And that is key. All right, so those are the minimum that we need, right? We our valid issuer, valid audience, and issuing key, right? Those are the minimum stuff that we need. So do we want it to validate the user? The answer is true. Do we want to validate the issuer? Excuse me, the audience. So validate audience. That is also true. That means when identity goes to check if this JWT is correct, it's going to actually check everything, right? We want that. Your mileage may vary, but so do we want to validate issue with sign a key? Oh yes, we do that. What else we need? Validated lifetime. Oh yes. And finally, oh screw here, set that to transparent at 0. Whew. That's a lot, but that's it. Once you have this piece in, you're pretty much ready to go. You're ready to set up your authentication piece. Or at least one portion of it's done. The only thing that's left is to actually, issue an actual JWT token, right? So let's go ahead and call this add authentication here. So if you add this in, before we do this, we just call this and pass in services. And for now, that is all that we need. All right, so that's a lot of stuff. Let's go ahead and begin running our app. Make sure that it is actually going to be able to connect to the database and things like that. So first thing you want to make sure here is that the connection string is properly set up. All right, so we set up the connection string. Database is called Coca Exotics. We just looked at it. It exists. Username. We got this username when we first created the database. Password. We got this password when we first created the database. You can leave out a timer if you want to. It's not a big deal. And that's in seconds, by the way. Was that milliseconds? No, it's seconds. Anyway, expiry 30 minutes, but don't worry about this piece yet because we haven't actually issued a JWT token yet. So bring up your package manager console. Make sure that it is pointing to the app that contains our DB context, which is this. And we're going to run our first migration. What is it? Add migration, and then you can give the migration a name. Convention is to usually just call it initial or something. And cross your fingers, make sure hopefully it all goes well. All right, so that's succeeded, almost. So could not find an assembly of exotic rentals that API that startup. All right, let's go take a look. Wow. What? Why? Oh, because we just call full name assembly. That full name. Rookie mistake right there, bro. Rookie mistake there. All right. Now that's beautiful right there. All right, so that went ahead and created a migrations folder. Within the migrations folder, it created a snapshot. Excuse me, it created our initial migrations. And here we can come and take a look at initial and see what's in it. So as you can see, most of these are tables that we're going to get created anyway. Have we done almost nothing? It's going to create the rows. As I mentioned, the rows, we don't have to do anything with that. That's created. All we really care about is the name typically. It created a ASP.NET users table, which we care about, and added these two that were otherwise not there. And for now, that's pretty much all that you need to worry about. But all of these are the tables that go into creating or setting up identity, ASP.NET Identity Authentication System. All right, so the next thing we want to do is, now that we've actually created a migration, we can actually update the database by simply calling update database. I always get this messed up with when you run the ASP.NET Core portion. All right, so that went without any without any issues. So let's go take a look to see what it looks like there. So Code Exotics, let's go check out our schemas, public schema, and tables. Look at that. That's nice. And we haven't run the application yet, so our users table is going to be, and of course you can see that everything is here. Users table is going to be empty because we haven't run the application yet. So that's going to be the next thing that we do. So let's go ahead and do that. So run that. Oh, no, that's nice. I just love this serial login. Look at this, how pretty it is. Can you see that? Look at that. All right, so it went ahead and we can actually read the commands and stuff like that. It actually went ahead and executed. So now that it ran and executed, we can actually go back and take a look at our pgadmin and make the same query again. Look at that. Oh man. Tell me that isn't beautiful right there. There you go. And that's save it as Jwt, test user, last name the user, username, test user, blah blah. Oh man, that's nice. Give yourself a pat on the back. You're almost done. Almost done. All right, so let's get back to our work here. You know, I'm just gonna make one call, try, execute, just so I can see serial log running in the back there. Yeah. Anyway, let me shut this down for a minute. All right. So let's go ahead and continue with our process here. So what's next? We have our database. Actually, before we go any further, take a step back again, review some of the stuff that we've done already. So first thing we needed to do was we created we added login in our program by pulling in serial log. We brought in the dependencies that we needed for that. And we created this file, which you don't really need to know too much about, with the exception of write to file, excuse me, write to console. You notice that when we install our dependencies, we installed this console sync. And I mentioned that we're not installing the file sync because we're not logging to the file. And that's what this is doing, right? So this takes over the logger for identity, excuse me, for ASP.NET. We went ahead and created the app settings. We added our connection string. We added JWT settings. And for those JWT settings, we also created a class that maps one-to-one to it. Options, I should say. We created an auth settings just to hold some, oh, actually, you know what? Let me go show you that also was created. So ASP.NET roles, go ahead and right? So you can see that that was created as well. The admin, manager, and so on and so forth. And if you go and look at ASP.NET roles, user roles, which is the joint table between the user and roles, you can see here that there's a user ID and a role ID. And obviously this user ID will map to the one user that we created, and this role ID will map to the staff role that we have. So anyway, so back to where we were. So we did that. We went and created some entities that we can use. We needed to create an application user that inherited from identity user, so we can add in our own properties, some fields, some first name and last name. We created a DB context. We called it rental DB context, which is what is connecting to our database and allowing entity framework to communicate with Postgres. We created a C data as well, so that whenever our application starts up, we can create roles if none exist, and we can also go ahead and create users if none exist. And we only need those to run like once, so they shouldn't run again. The next item that we did was we came back into our startup, and in our startup we configured the JWT options so that we can inject this into our controllers and other places and make use of it. We added identity and added application user and identity role because that's what it takes. It just takes identity user, but we went ahead and implemented our own identity user. So, and we also added in this any framework, told it what the connection string was, and then tell it where our migrations is going to be. And then last but not least, the big piece here is we added authentication, right? It's as simple as you can do it. Setting up some default authentication, saying that we're going to be using JWT bearer tokens. For now, we've set save cookies or save token to false. And we set up some parameters that specifically bring in these three important things that we need from the JWT options here, right? We want to validate the issuer, we want to validate the audience, we want to validate the issuing signing key, and also validate the lifetime as well. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So now we can actually go ahead and start creating some things. Before we do that, let me go ahead and pull up a Postman so we can make some authentication calls to the back end. If you don't have Postman installed, that's okay. You can go ahead and install it. It's pretty easy to install. Just literally Google postman.com and it should be good to go. Unless you use something else, that's fine too. All right, so let's get our services going. So what we need is an authentication service, something that hands out or creates a JWT token and sends it out to the client. So let's create a folder called the services folder. Make that capital S, services. And you can call this service either authentication service. No, I think identity server already. ASP.NET already has an identity. Oh, didn't mean to create that. Yes. So what we can do is create a class. And first, let me actually create an interface for that class and call it token service, because all it's going to do is generate tokens. Yeah. So let's just call it token service. And of course, this token. And what does it do? It's going to return a string. I don't know, but generate Generate token. Generate token async. You know what? Let's call it login. Let me actually no. Let me scratch that. Let me delete this because I'm not going to create a separate service file. I'm just going to create a user authentication class. So first, let's create the interface. Keep the I user authentication service. And that should be public, of course. Task string, because all we need to do is really generate the token, return the token. So string authenticate async. Yeah, authenticate async. And it should take in the username and password. So let's use a string. Username, string, password. I actually don't like that. That's why. So let me actually go create a class. This is where the models for this is going to come in. So let's create a auth model. Just going to be a small. Go auth. Oh, just model. Authenticate auth model. And all it does is just wrap of string, username, and password. And oops, it's good enough. Let's go back here and actually replace this with call auth model. And of course, we'll now bring that in. Should we return a string or should we return an object that has maybe like a Boolean something to it? All right, let's do that. Maybe an auth result. Probably shouldn't be doing all this stuff. I want to try to keep things simple, right? Less complication. So let's see, string would be the token. String would be the token and the Boolean, maybe it's authenticated or it's authenticated. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's good enough. So if it comes back and it's not authenticated, then we can just say return bad request or something like that. Sorry, so instead of that, let's do this. Keep it simple, as they say. So let's go and we take this name so I don't have to write the whole name. And just remove the I from that. And that inherits from I authentication user. Oh, too many I's there. Take one off. Implement that. And of course, that's going to be async. And that's fine for now. Create a constructor. And we're going to need the user manager. Probably need the roles. And maybe a password manager. But we definitely need the user manager. So which one does that do? That does that. Oh, we want the one that's going to add it to, yep, that one. Let me fold this in a little bit so you can get a better view of it. Perfect, perfect. All right, so user blah 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 blah. Authenticate async. Oh, just create it. That was the got that it's actually going to create one for me. Perfect. All right, so a few things we want to do here. We want to create a result equals new auth result. And you know what we can actually do here? Let's always set this to false. Although it's a boolean, so it's already false, but whatever. It's default to false, but all right. So we'll just say that. I guess we don't need to initialize with anything here. All right, so let's go. All right, what do we need? So we need a user. So vr username. No, we don't want that. Fine, by username async. This is that async. Let's go ahead and await that. If this is null, then just return the result. Because in the front end, we're going to check, not front end, but the controller class is going to check if it's not authenticated, then we're just going to, yeah. All right. So what else? If it's not user, if it is, then we're going to go ahead and continue and sign a user in and make sure that that actually works too. So let's put a little space there. VR. Sign in results equals sign in manager that sign in async, and I takes in application user and takes in a password. And that one doesn't take a password. What we need is the sign in with password, which takes the application user password, which is going to be the auth model. That password. So you see, we don't need to do anything in terms of like, first of all, let's go ahead and await that. So as you can see here, so I was saying you don't need to do any sort of hash and any of that stuff with, even though we are doing our own JWT tokens and stuff, .NET Core still makes it pretty easy. .NET still makes it really easy to do authentication. So do we want this to persist? I don't know, not sure. Do we want to lock the user out on failure? No, because I'm testing. So yeah, mileage may vary. You might want to set this based on maybe a settings or something like that. So just like you have the JWT option settings, so you can pass that as an options in here, so that you can lock the user out if they try too many times. So, so what does sign in result? Success. If it's success, yes. If not, we do the same thing here. Go ahead and return result, right? Because if it isn't, then obviously they fail. So now that the users sign in, we know that this user is successful. Now we have to actually go ahead and generate a token. So let me just create a private async task. Oops. Come on. That returns a string. Feels good. Now we can actually call that generate token, and it can be private. We don't need it to be public here. And we should just take in the user. Yeah, just take the user in. Although it's private and it's in here, so I don't even think well, actually no, because the user is not here. So takes an application user, so we can grab some of the roles of the user and generate that. So var token equals string.mt. sure, and just return await task from result token here. So we can return this and get this out of my way. Bring this up a little bit more, give it some room to see. So what do we want here? We want to generate a token. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just start the token generation piece, and then I'll come back and show you some of the things that we want to add to the token itself. So, whew. Yeah, now building this itself is not easy. It takes a lot of time. So what we need the token. We need to generate some few things here. So let's go and get the security. We are a security key. And how do we get our security key? Remember that we created a security key by telling, where's my startup application? We just go right to it. Said that the security uses a symmetric key. So actually we can actually just grab this whole piece right here. So security key equals new symmetric key. Let's bring that in. Bring text. And of course here we don't have access to this, but we don't need that, right? Because we have options. So options, and the value object, it has key. All right, so that's how we get access to the key here. Now what else we need? So now that we have the key, we now need to get a sign in credential. Sign in credential equals new sign in credentials. I know it's like which passes in the security key, as you can see there, and the type of algorithm that we're going to be using, which in this case is going to be security algorithm SHA-256. Where's 256? H, I think it's HMAC. Okay. Phew, HMAC. That's that. All right. Yeah, that's a long one. All right. So it's gonna be a security token, the actual security token equals new JWT security token. Where's that? I don't see JWT security token. I do not see that yet. Gotta bring that in. All right, almost there, almost there. All right, what does it take? It takes a, well, it has, as you can see, it's got a lot of overrides. The one that we're gonna pass it should take an issuer. And the issuer is going to be our JWT options value issuer. It takes an audience. Make sure you fill in this portions in, otherwise JWT is not going to work. Value, come on, audience. What else it needs? And it needs claims. We haven't created claims yet. We'll come back to claims in a bit. So just leave that for now here. Actually, I guess without it's gonna keep barking. So let me just hold off for that for a minute. All right, so it takes that. All right, so now we lost access to our intelligence. All right, there it is. Audience, yeah, click claims. Aspire. All right. Aspires in daytime dot UTC dot add minutes. And how many minutes? Minutes is going to be the options dot that remember that this is a on this property. Expiry. Remember this is the because it's integer that we added. What else we need? So we have our issuer, audience, the time that it expires, sign in credential. Things won't go well without sign in credentials. Let me fold this down a little bit. And that should be it. Last thing we need is the to actually turn this into a token. Let me turn that into a token. Yeah, I know token is not done yet. So token equals new JWT handler, I believe it's called JWT token handler dot write token and takes in the security token. Sweet. All right. Now, JWT tokens. So what's in it? JWT tokens composed of a header, section, some payload and stuff like that. And we'll take a look at it when we get online to look at one JWT token.io or jwt.io, I believe. But what we need is we want to add some claims to the user so that when we go to actually sign in, now it will still sign in because as you can see, is it's as long as we pass in the right password, it's still going to sign in. The problem you're going to run into is that if you don't actually include the rows and you have the authentication or excuse me authorization on particular controllers, then it's not going to work. So we're going to cure that right now and actually make sure we add that in before we forget. So let's go ahead and grab the rows and claims. So VR, let's say our user claims, await user manager and get claims. Not get claims async. Get users for claims, no get claims. Bypass it in the user. All right, so that should be that. So that gives us the user claims. VR user rows equals await user manager get rows. User again. So that gives us access to all the claims that the user has, all the rows the user has. Right now, we already know the user doesn't have any claims because we never actually created claims. So what else we need here? So VR claims equals user claims dot to list. Let's go to list on this object here so you can start adding stuff to it. So now we can actually uncomment this piece and say claims is actually claims. Sweet. Don't forget that. Hey, why are you still complaining? Oh, because I added this. Sorry. Hot. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all the user roles. So sweet. Oh, not enough. All right, so for grab all the user claims and add them in as user claims. All right. That looks correct to me. What else we need? So claims, add range. Now here's where we can also add some additional stuff here too. So All right. So in our controllers, let's go create a controller that can actually, well, getting ahead of ourselves here. Still got to return this. So await. So result dot token goes await generate async, pass it in our user, result dot if authenticated. And I think the way to actually use this is to not do it this way. It's authenticated if this our result. Instead of doing this, you can just say authenticated is just a getter. So remove this. Return. Space token. That's all. So now we don't even have to like set it. We can just grab it all the time. So just do that and then just return result. Sweetness. All right, so now we go ahead and we're gonna now go and use this somewhere. Before we use it, just so I don't forget, let's go to startup, add in services, Jwt Authentication, services.add scoped, authentication service, we use the authentication service, and that, and go ahead and bring them in. Perfect. Go for create our first controller. Almost there. Almost there. Add in an API controller. Nope. We want API. And what shall we call this one? User authentication controller. Login controller. Maybe login controller. Account controller. Yeah, that sounds good. I can go with that. So API accounts. Sweet. And first thing we need is HTTP. It's going to be a post. And we actually don't even need to give it a route because it's going to be the only, it's going to be maybe like one or two here. It's going to be log in and log out. I guess we want log out to also be a post. So we'll make log out. We'll give log out the route name and not give this one a name. So just HTTP post. And what we want to do here is public async pass should return action results. Yes. And simply just call authenticate. 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 All right. And it should take an auth model. And let's decorate an auth model with some required data annotation, so we don't even have to worry about checking if they actually haven't entered the right stuff here. Required. That works. Sweet. So now with that, the first thing we can do is we can check to see if not model. Oops, model state. If model state is valid. Come on, IntelliSense. non-model state as valid, and just return bad requests. And I believe that's just yeah. Okay. So sign in results equals sold off. Let's go ahead and create a constructor. Actually, you don't have to create a constructor because it's going to be private, read only, what do you call it? I use authentication, use authent. Why don't I be lazy and just go ahead and copy this here? I use authentication service. Authentication service, and let's bring that in. Come on. There you go. And let's generate a constructor with that. Thank you. Await authentication service that authentication, passing in model. If sign in results that is authenticated, and we do stuff. If it's not, then we're just going to return bad request or not authenticated or something. Just turn. Yeah, that's good enough. Username and or password doesn't match. On the other hand, if everything matches, then we just return our result. That's a heavy one. All right, so let's go ahead and run this app. Let me bring up, we call this account controller. And I'm going to issue a post. So let's change this over to post. It's going over to localhost HTTP 5001 API account. And we don't really need this part. Account controller. Username, this was one of the test items that I had. So let's actually try with that and see what our response is. Our response back, username and or password is not matched. So we're almost there. All right. So now let's go and look at the actual username and password, which is going to be cdata. Username is test user. And password is secrets 123. Let me actually copy this one since I'm going to remember test user, hopefully. Hopefully my memory is not that bad. So test user. Wait, is that the same password? Oh, no, slightly different. Whoa, look at that. Now that is beautiful. So we now get back our token, and indeed the user is authenticated. Now that is beautiful. Let's take this, take it to jwt.io, jwt.io, and let's remove this part, paste it in. Look at this. So go over a few things that we put into our stuff. So we, in our claim, remember that in our claim, we added a row type of claims was called role. All right, just give you some recollection here. When we created our service, we said that claim types, we added role. Okay. So that's what you're seeing here. We also included a user's email address as one of the claim types. You saw that. And then for the sub, which is the subject is a user. And for the subject, we chose the user's email. right? You'll see that. Let me actually put this to the side here so you can see them side by side. And let me close this for a second. Enlarge this just a little bit so you can see. All right. So if you look here, for the claim type, we added a claim type of role, claim type of user, and that's what's being recollected here, staff. And for the username, we added a email. And for some reason I add email, then put an email address. Well, that's strange. Let's not do that because that's going to be confusing. That's going to be, I believe there's one simply for name or something like that. Yeah, there you go. All right, so if we generate again, then you will see that it will be a name there. My bad, should have looked at it clearly when I was doing it. Anyway, for the unique identifier, and this is for, it's going to be different every time, so that's why we generated brand new. And then the time that it expires, the issuer, right? We put that, the issuer should be us. And then also for the audience, we put that the audience should be us as well. All right, so last thing we're going to do before we close out is to actually be able to use this token. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more controller here. And this is just going to be, pretty simple controller. Doesn't really bring anything. So let's go ahead and create another. And for this, let's call this route. Let's call it secure or something, right? Secret. Makes sense. And it's going to be a type of HTTP GET. And again, same thing here, right? Async task, action result, secret. And all of this is just return a secret. So what we're going to do here is going to simply return new okay object results, which is going to await task from results, something like you cannot have my secret. Oh, you can't. All right, so let's run this real quick and open up Postman. We don't need this for now, although because you can also use that as well. But since I already started with Postman, I might as well continue with Postman. So API, and for now, I'm gonna just leave this here. API account secret. Send a request. And method unallow because it's not a post, it's a get. And here you go. You can have my secret, but that's not true because I just got your secret, bro. So what we want to do is we want to decorate this with a secret. Or not a secret. We want to decorate this and authorize. Authorize. There you go. And while we at it, let's also do some more decoration by telling our swagger what this thing can produce. So right now that this has been added, let's go back and try again. If we try Postman one more time. And here you are, we are unauthorized. We can't access it. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and sign in again with this user. So let's remove this part here because that, and then that goes to the post. And that's going to go post. Return back to us our token. We're going to take that token, change this to the get, go back to secret, and authorize. We're going to add in a authorization. Type is going to be bearer token. It's already selected. Remove the old bearer token that you may have been testing with, like I'm doing right now. And now we send a request. And let's make sure we did copy that in properly. Paste that again. Do a get. And let's check. Requires an authenticated user. Successfully validated token. Bearer token. Bearer was challenged. All right, so it looks like I think I know what's happening here. All right, so we are still getting 401 unauthorized, and I think I know why that is. In fact, I'm pretty sure I know what it is. So what we did here is we call add authentication, which is added to the pipeline and configure, but we actually never use it here. So this almost always happens. So add authentication. That explains why, because we put in the authorized attribute on the controller, but it can't actually be used. Let me just clean the solution real quick. Build it again. Run it. I would say this is unusual. Visual Studio normally never is this slow on my machine anyway. Let me run it on IS. So the app failed to start. App failed to start, but then stop. Do an exception during. Interesting. This must be something with this current instance of Visual Studio. Must be a bug, because I never have this much issue launching. And last time all I had to do was clean, rebuild, launch. It must be dying very early then, because I'm not even getting any login. Let's try something here. Open this up. Open in terminal. Oh my. This is what the nothing like debugging, right? Yeah, where am I? Okay. Yeah, like it almost always runs for me here. Something must be up with Visual Studio. But anyway, let's just run the app so we can show you what we were doing. So get back here. Let's get a new token. So let's go post secret post body. We get back a token. Take this token, change this, go to secret, get, and authorization bearer token is selected. Let's remove this one, put this one, send, still 401. Okay, I guess it's not impossible. How, if you're watching this, you probably saw that I never changed it. It's getting too late now. You can tell I never changed this from ah, now I gotta run this through here again. Let's let it run again. I want to run from fresh and rebuild that. I think that the token is probably still okay, but I might actually might as well just fire it off. Ha! There you go. All right, that's the end of this. That was a lot. That was a lot that we covered. So what we'll do is when we get together next time, we're actually gonna go cover adding in a what do you call it? Refresh tokens to make this a little bit more secure than it is right now. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. I don't think I did because I'm looking at the time that we used to record this and it's a lot of hours. So I don't know how much is going to be of it when it's edited, but hopefully you enjoy this. This takes a lot of work. This piece is getting together, but once you have the framework or you build something like this, you can just use it as a boilerplate. Use it as a boilerplate going forward. So, you know, that's that. All right. If you enjoyed this, subscribe, like, share, all that fun stuff. Hope to see you next time. Bye.